congrats on first season of The Bad Batch.
Thanks.
How awesome has it been? I mean, it's your show really this time around. It's been incredible to watch you do your thing or hear you do your thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of me in it, but it's a large collaboration. Michelle does a fantastic job. I mean, there's Steve Stanton. There's Nosha. There's a great cast involved, and then of course everyone at Lucas Animation. There's I think it's CG does the animation, and it's a vast collaboration. Even if it's a lot of me talking to myself.
Well, you do have one of the coolest end credits ever, which is Dee Bradley Baker as the Bad Batch. Like you don't even it's just the Bad Batch.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'll ever see anything like this again in my life.
No one would be crazy enough.
Well, it's just such a unique project for me. I got a great career going and been at it for a while, but I'm still, I still see myself as kind of a session player, normally invisible. And if I'm doing my job, nobody thinks about me. I don't want anybody thinking about me at all. I want them just to think about the characters or the animals or creatures in the show. And so this is an unusual amount of spotlight. In addition to, more importantly, just the creative challenge of bringing these guys to life and making them distinct and really selling a story that's emotional and brings you along. And it's not just about moving chess pieces around on a chessboard or anything. It's a great story. Jen and Brad and Dave really did a great job in sort of bringing the last of George Lucas's creation and fingerprints to life. Because George was directly involved with the Bad Batch and the creating of the Bad Batch and the original arc that was not fully produced under him, but the vocal recording was done. And of course, George Lucas was directly involved with all along the way with the Clone Wars, and this is kind of the escape pod that made it from Clone Wars. That's
and it also puts the final. It puts the Clone Wars to rest in many ways. We saw in season 1, especially with the destruction of Kamino. That, to me, does a lot to finalize the Clone Wars. And finally,
it's a devastating visual finish to the whole thing. I mean, the end of the Clone Wars series, that also had kind of a devastating visual metaphor for the curtain that was being brought down. But then this is the epilogue that we've seen, that is the finality, the destruction of the city, the obliteration of the entire creative complex that made the clones. It's an extermination of an entire machine that created humans.
Well, they're sort of hinting at what we can assume is going to be some sort of genocide. I mean, this isn't kiddie stuff. This is wiping out a huge population of people. And one of the things that we've been talking an awful lot about as we've been doing our after shows is, some of the moral implications and why something that we've brought up on the show is why perhaps have the clones that were in closest proximity to their Jedi generals, why have they, maybe more than the regs, been able or more comfortable kind of with their own individuality and that sort of thing? And we've kind of pontificated a little bit. Well, maybe it's about the Jedi and the way that they see the clones. They see them as we learned in the very beginning of the Clone Wars with Yoda and Ambush, that they see them as individuals and sort of extol the virtues of their individuality, whereas the other ones aren't as privy to that. Is that something you've ever given any thought to, as to why there are certain clones that are more comfortable with their individuality than others?
Well, my reading of it, which really comes mostly from an interview of Brad and Jen, because they're the keepers of the kingdom of the words of the mythology at this point, for as far as Bad Batch is concerned, and the way that I understand it is that the chips are powerful, but they may have an uneven effect on efficacy on clones, and it also it doesn't necessarily continue its influence, that it may dial itself back down, at least for some. But you're right. I mean, it's an interesting thought that there's a stronger relationship perhaps between a clone and a clone's Jedi, although, as we saw at the beginning of the Bad Batch, that didn't help much.
No, it didn't. It didn't. Well, the biggest surprise of the season has been Omega, no question about it. And I'll admit, I was one of those fans who saw Omega in the previews, and I said to myself, oh, dear Lord, there's going to be a kid character in this show. It's not going to have an edge. But as it turns out, the show did have quite an edge. And I was just wondering what your reaction was to Omega, and what you witnessed in her as far as character growth throughout season 1.
Well, it's really all beautifully written, isn't it? It's a story that as you say at first glance might seem like you got something kind of treacly sweet coming at you, and yet you've got the final decline of the remnant of what was the clones and their whole world, their birthing chambers and all of that. So it's sort of the finish to that dark descent. And then in addition, you've got you've got something that's very interesting and very relevant, which is essentially democracy handing itself over to fascism. Trying to think of some examples that I've seen recently, which I'm being facetious. It's a precarious thing, democracy, right? And it happens, as we've seen, and as we nearly saw, that democracy can hand itself over to an authoritarian regime, and that's what's happening here. And so, in the middle of that, and this isn't heavy-handed or too on the nose in terms of pointing to anything, but look, Star Wars is not just fantasy. There's real relationships, there's moral questions, and there's some larger themes that are playing out politically and militarily that I think resonate with people, and give it great meaning and make the human story of it far more interesting. Because you've got this, it's kind of a thrown together voluntary family set up with, it's almost like an adopted daughter, and yet she's not adopted, is she? She's older than they are, and they are all family, right? They are family, literally. And so it's an interesting transition to see these armed special tactics guys who suddenly have to learn a completely new game. I mean, that kind of was their mojo, right? Is just you've got a tough situation that's odd or difficult or problematic in weird ways. You throw these guys in there, and they sort of improvise their way through it successfully because they're such a great team. And that's what they do, is they roll with it. And so that's what they're doing here, only in a completely different space, which is not just in the middle of the Clone Wars, where they're the special ops guys, but this is a transformation of the political structure that underlies the galaxy, and they're trying to find their place in that. But it's not just a matter of getting by or finding a new position, although Crosshair's doing that in a way. I mean, he wants to find a place that works for his skill set in the new order, and he wants to be a part of it. He doesn't want to be rubbed out, and destroyed. It's like he's smart and he can see what's coming, right?
So is it with Crosshair, is your read that it is survival for him?
Well, ultimately they're all survivors, aren't they? But his take is to go with what looks like is going to be the winning side, and then, I mean, there's a rationality to what he's saying. It's not, he's not just this evil character. He's trying to find some place where they have some footing, and that they have some status, and I mean, if you think of it in terms of that, it makes sense. Yeah. It's just that the kind of moral compass that he has is not awakened by the child, by the kid who's hanging around, as it does with the others.
I gotta ask, because I'm so fascinated by the differences in the voices, and so I'm just curious. I would imagine that as you were building out the voices of the cast, that accent, that typical clone voice, the standard clone voice, is some sort of starting point or baseline. It's definitely a through line. And then how do you go about? How do you know how far you can twist it to where it still fits in the pocket of being a clone voice, but yet shows their individuality?
Yeah. Well, when we started with Dave Filoni starting to flesh this out, of George Lucas's idea of the Bad Batch, you start with the basic clone voice, which is sort of a I'll call it my version of that. Is it's like it's New Zealand, Australian, English, American hybrid, really, is what it finally arrived at. What I finally arrived at, and then once you throw in these guys, the Bad Batch, it was clear that they needed to be further apart than that. And so what I chose to do was to keep it sort of in the UK, Australian world, but to branch off into, for instance, Tech and Crosshair are more proper British, or my version of that,
right?
Such as it is. And Wrecker is more Cockney, and then Tech, Tech is more, and then Hunter is more closer to a clone, and of course Echo is as well, and so that's the delineation as far as their accents and the sound of their voices that I tried to. The dialect I tried to dial in.
And has Crosshair, that voice evolved since you sort of learned that he was going to be, for all intents and purposes, the villain of the series? Or did you just kind of luck out where you happened to play him with sort of a more snaky, sinister, I'm a 80s kid, so I get G.I. Joe vibes, so I hear a little Cobra Commander almost in that, and I mean that in the highest regard. But was it just luck that you sort of played him that way and then he ended up being the villain, or have you evolved it a bit?
Well, I mean, the way his character is set, he's originally at the end of the Clone Wars with the Bad Batch arc that they had, which was one of my favorite arcs. I even in the animatic form that they showed at Celebration, a couple celebrations back, is like, I love this arc. This is one of my favorites, actually. But
why?
I just thought it was great Star Wars. Just
you just
simply.
mean purely storytelling.
Yeah, just the storytelling. No, not because it was all me. Not because I was in it. I mean, that's fun, but it's like that's my selection of episodes that I like is not necessarily because I'm in them.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, from the beginning, Crosshair is the most I mean, he's a sniper, right? That implies he's up on the mountain. He's up in the tower. He's far away from what is happening. So right away, his specialization suggests a separation from the group. And then that kind of laser precision, one shot, one thing that he does, there's a severity to that. There's a simplicity to that. And he's not surrounded by people. He's by himself. So right away, these things suggest a guy who's a little different in character from the rest of the team. That's, where one's throwing something up and the other's jumping, and they're a little more collaborative in a coordinated.
Yeah, it's like they're synchronized, whereas he's doing, their team sport. He's individual sport almost.
There you go.
Right. I mean, and they all certainly work together. It's really exciting to see that go down. But from the way that his character was kind of conceived and written originally, it suggested there's a resistance or a grumpiness, a difficulty, a solitary, just a solitude to the guy that would not make him Mr. Polka Dot and Moonbeams, Mr. Fun guy. He's not a lot of fun. Like Wrecker's fun, but not.
They like to hang with Wrecker, for sure.
Wrecker, you want to hang with.
Beyond the accents, do you tap into any specific individuals, like maybe famous Hollywood personalities over the years?
Sure.
Or, for the individual characters of the Bad Batch, would you mind telling us who some of those actors might have been to inspire someone like Crosshair, maybe?
Well, really, for Crosshair, there's a little bit of Hannibal Lecter in there.
Yeah, I hear it.
Well, it's just that kind of deliberate, Clarice, that very deliberate, even unshakableness to him. Yeah. And I mean, Tech is just he's very clipped and very precise, and he throws everything off. Nothing really affects him very much. And Wrecker's just a little boy. I mean, he's like a kid. Hunter's got there's something kind of smoky and mysterious about him. He's also not, I mean, the brightest character in terms of just the tone is Wrecker. He's like we said, he's the most fun. But actually, it's funny that you mentioned it. This is very silly, but it amused me because I was listening to my playlist of songs that I like, and one of them is the Time Warp.
Rocky Horror Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was listening to it, and I was thinking, it's astounding. Time is fleet. I was like, holy crap. What if Crosshair sang the Time Warp? So wait, who's the woman with Ventress?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you listen through it, and it's like, oh, that's perfect.
That
would be awesome.
Somebody get Nika Futterman on the phone.
Yeah.
We need to get you guys in a recording studio ASAP.
Yeah. And she could do Cy Snoodles, Well, I was walking down the street just to happen to think when the think of a guy gives me an Evo wink. That's Cy Snoodles right there.
Holy cow.
And then it's just a jump to the left. Probably Yoda. I mean, that's all very silly, but to me,
that would be great.
Can
you work on that maybe for Halloween?
No, I gotta.
He's too busy.
Does that put Wrecker singing "Hot Patootie, Bless My Soul"?
Yeah. Wow, you could recast the whole movie with Star Wars characters, I guess.
Yeah,
Wrecker
it's a horrible idea.
Wrecker kind of had a trademark when he was really pumped up about running into battle, or he blew up something or something. He'd always say, "Oh yeah," kind of like the Kool-Aid guy a little bit. My impersonation is like the Kool-Aid guy. But was that something you guys came up as an ad lib, or was that in the script? Because you really embraced that, and I heard that same "oh yeah" delivery about 3 or 4 times in season 1.
His original opening line, I believe, was "Make a hole." And, I don't know if they kept that. But
We have to look it up.
I tend, especially with Wrecker, I tend to improvise around what is written. Sometimes I'll bother, Jen and Brad and change a word up here and there. And I might rephrase it, but generally the words are great and don't need to be changed at all by the actor. But I do add seasoning before and after to kind of add to the realism of the interactions, and they do keep a fair amount of, especially of what Wrecker's doing, of the riffage that I throw out there.
Speaking of Wrecker, I would assume that voice probably takes a little bit more toll on your voice and your throat than some of the others. Do you save your Wrecker stuff, or do you always, deliver or record those scenes in sequence, as the conversation is evolving according to the script, or do you have some ability to say, let's save the Wrecker stuff till the end or something?
Right. I try to do them straight through, if at all possible. Especially if it's all conversational, then we just do it straight through. But if it's yelling, if it's in battle yelling and that kind of stuff, then it's generally a better idea to put that at the end of the session. So we'll do at least, it's not all episode. There's not an episode where it's just all yelling. But the ones that do have the battle with Wrecker, we might sprinkle that at the end of the session rather than straight through.
Do you guys do the full cast recording for Bad Batch like you did with Clone Wars?
Well, they try. Let's see. There's in the days of COVID, it's not always everybody together. I mean, it's more efficient for the actors just to have me do my stuff. And if they can, they get Michelle in on that as well. But that's difficult because she's on the other side of the planet, and the timing doesn't always work out with her work and her family and all over there. And she's mostly the one that I'm interacting with. I mean, sometimes we've had Ray Perlman, who does Sid. We've done that a couple of times, I think. But mostly the Bad Batch is talking to themselves or to Omega. They're not like hanging out with the evil guys or with a lot of other interesting stuff, which is part of why it's fun for me to actually see the shows, because I've not seen the shows when they aired them. Yes. So every week I'm waiting to see what happened because I hardly remember it, and there's much of it that I was not a part of, so I wouldn't even have anything to remember.
Do you use any kind of video conferencing or anything so that when you can hook up at the same time, you can at least, is it easier to play off of each other, or does that, is that, okay.
Yeah, it's done over Zoom.
Oh, wow, really?
It's done over Zoom, and then I record my session on Twisted Wave. It's an audio recording software, and I upload it to them, and they just chop it up and put it together. I think they record the session over Zoom, but that's just kind of as a temp. So I'm recording the master recording here on my machine, in my garage, in my studio.
Amazing.
Did you know about the Bad Batch eventually evolving into a series when you were recording their episodes for season 7? No.
No.
So what was your reaction like when you were told about it for the first time?
Well, I mean, that's a dream. It's a dream. It's a dream to be, a kid who was into Star Wars when Star Wars originally came out.
Yes.
To be in the Star Wars universe, to be a part of that. To begin with, just to be anything in it alone. And then to be, a significant role that is an interesting acting exercise, an interesting creative challenge. That's really exciting as well. But then to make, for them to say, yeah, what you did on this particular arc here, we like this so much that we're going to make a series out of it, basically, with you talking to yourself. I mean, that there's nothing to compare that to. I've never had anything like that, and I don't think that I ever will again.
Wow.
Who knows? But it's it's such a triple whammy of awesome that
actors.
I was floored. I'm not surprised, but it's like I can't tell if I just really like these guys because I perform it, and I think that's kind of cool. But it's like, no, Dave Filoni and Disney and others, they think that's a cool idea too. So great, let's do it.
Well, you see these movies with these old-timey actors saying, it's a really meaty part. I got a meaty part. And I think about you in Bad Batch, and it's like, not only do you have a meaty part, you've got multiple meaty parts.
Yeah.
It's
right.
It's got to be amazing.
It is. It's dramatically interesting, acting. It's acting. It's straight ahead acting, actually.
Yeah.
And, at least half of what I do is not like that. It's a very different kind of acting where it's animals and creatures. I'm the rat in the Suicide Squad. Actually, I'm all the rats, but I'm Sebastian the rat. And Shang-Chi, the Marvel superhero movie, there's this really weird creature in it, and I'm also that. So I'm usually just doing the weird stuff. But here it's like, nope, this is the most straight-ahead thing I will ever do.
Dee, I tell you, I hear your voice every single day of my life because my kids are the biggest SpongeBob SquarePants fans on the planet. So I'm
There's a lot more SpongeBob coming. They're going to be very happy.
I mean, they're into the camp
shows right now.
Oh yeah, the Camp Coral and the Patrick Star Show. I mean, anyway, not to derail, but I'm constantly hearing. I'm like, that's Dee.
Well. Yeah, I mean, those are great shows. I'm not just saying it because I'm on them. I think they're genuinely funny. The storyboards that sort of lead the way on that kind of animation, they're great. They're still very funny, very edgy, fresh, and really sharp and funny. They're very funny. They're very cartoony. Very broad, it's like vaudeville on acid.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's
right.
just they
it's
go
the
really
closest
far
thing
with it.
I think we have to the classic Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny cartoons of the 40s and 50s. I think it's the closest we've got.
Which was the logical extension of Buster Keaton and vaudeville and that kind of a thing.
Yes,
they were pushing that kind of visual comedy, which really you can track that back to like Aristophanes and Commedia in Italy. I mean, just really broad, playing to the cheap seats comedy.
Right.
And and Keaton and others really developed that visually back in the 20s and 30s in really brilliant ways. Where you look at it and it's like that's a live action cartoon. What they're doing right there.
Yes. Right.
What we now understand as a cartoon, which was kind of fulfilled with Looney Tunes, with doing that kind of, I mean, Duck Amuck it might be the most prominent example of just visual comedy. I mean, you're playing with the dynamics of vision to make it funny. And and so that's I mean, how much further can you take that? Ren and Stimpy, maybe? A show I was on, Cow and Chicken. It's like they go pretty far, and there's, it's out there. It's way out there, and that's exhilarating. And SpongeBob is in that lineage. It very much is in that lineage, and that's part of the fun. It kicks my ass vocally, but it's great fun to just scream or just to yell or to do really just kind of violent physical voice acting. I mean, it's again, it couldn't be more different from Star Wars.
Oh, it's so different from the Bad Batch.
That's why you're such a chill dude all the time, is because you get it all out of your system behind that microphone.
Yeah, I got to charge up my batteries for the next round. And my voice.
You brought up Warner Brothers, and Mel Blanc. He was a one-man cast, and in many ways, sir, you are the Mel Blanc of the Bad Batch.
Oh, well, that's a nice comparison. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, he was a really versatile guy, really funny. And he comes from vaudeville and that kind of performing as well. I would have wished for his generation of voice actors to have the kind of broad palette of styles and genres that are now in play. Because back then, cartoons were cartoony. Right. And, about as tame as you get is like maybe the Flintstones or kind of the animated sitcoms of the day. But those were still pretty cartoony. But they didn't have like straight ahead stuff like, there certainly wasn't anime, there wasn't Clone Wars, there's just so many examples. Death and Robots. That's just
now you got me thinking of what a Mel Blanc drama would be like, or if he really got
right.
to sink his teeth in, because we know that great comedians often turn out to be some of the best dramatic actors.
Yes.
There are.
You can't. I think you can be a good dramatic actor, a straight ahead actor. Who doesn't do comedy, but I don't think you can do comedy well without being a good actor.
I think you're absolutely right. I do want to ask, since you've had such a long history with Star Wars and being involved in multiple series, what's been the biggest surprise for you with this particular series? What has surprised you in terms of maybe fans or what's been different this go-around?
The thing that's most surprising is the thing that's the most heartening, is that Star Wars, George Lucas's original ideas still thrive in fresh soil with fresh ideas, with new writers, new directors coming in, that are still connected to his creative lineage, I would say, directly through Dave Filoni. But that those ideas still find such fresh and interesting purchase in the soil of the 21st century. Every time I see it, it's like they did it. They really, I wish I were 10 years old. I wish I were 10 years old and watching The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch and The Clone Wars and waiting for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. It's like this is not just spinning off a derivative of a derivative into just blandness. That's just money-making blandness. It's keeping vital a really interesting universe with good writing and good an entirely good investment in really top people to make it interesting and fun and what it deserves to be, without being merely obedient to what it was. They're taking it in avenues that are fresh and new and different, but really great entertainment. And still, they're still what Star Wars was, which is there's an epic story playing out, but it's a personal story playing out that grabs you and that holds you and that makes this mean something, whether you're talking about soldiers or you're talking about a family. This is what makes it really good, is the attention to the important stuff in telling epic storytelling, and happily, after Disney took over, the franchise very quickly landed on its feet and just kept going, and I think they're just making everybody, I can't imagine how you cherry pick the people to do this and make this kind of a thing go. That's not what I do. I'm a gun for hire. I'm like Crosshair maybe. But the people that put that kind of stuff together, they have the right idea and the right touch to make it relevant and to make it probably more relevant and more awesome than it's ever been. And as I said, I envy the kids. I envy everybody. I envy coming from an old fan, I love it. I'm excited about it. But I envy those who are just coming online with it. It's because there's so much
we can't
more
wait for season
stuff coming.
Oh yeah.
I
was just going to say we can't wait for season 2. Congratulations. And was that always the plan to drop a season 2, or did you find out late in the season?
I knew about that. We once we finished with season 1, we just kind of kept going. I think, this is all speculation on my part, but I think that the folks at Disney saw how it was going, and they just said, "Yep, more of that." Because, one of the great things about these days and all the streaming wars and everything that are playing out is that good content is king. And there's 500 things to watch. What are you going to watch? The good stuff. What makes it good? What makes it good? Good writers, great creative teams top creative people and technicians, and taking interesting chances, not just replicating, not just photocopying what was done, but taking interesting chances in interesting directions, which Star Wars is doing, Marvel is doing, and there's a lot of other examples as well. You can go back and do the same thing that used to be done and maybe try to do exactly that, but fresher. There's examples of that are good, that are okay, but for my money, I think it's more impressive to see like what's happened with Star Wars. I mean, there's a lot of innovation, and which comes, I think, from it's a courage that comes from creative confidence that is well founded.
Dee, one final question here for you. What's been fascinating to watch as a Star Wars fan is how the animated universe and the quote unquote live action universes, they've combined, they've congealed. It's one big universe. And we do this Bad Batch after show every week, and we take live calls. And I would say every week without fail, there's some caller that says, when the Bad Batch, they're going to show up on Kenobi, or the Bad Batch is going to show up on this. And so what's interesting is how there's no line anymore between, well, this is animated, this is live action. These characters are just part of the universe, period, regardless of the medium. How does that make you feel about the possibility and the fan support about seeing some of these characters that you've helped create showing up in one of these other projects?
Well, really, from the get-go, from the Clone Wars on, I think Star Wars is conceived of as a cinematic story. And the people that are creating it are people who make the movies. Joel Aaron and everybody else. I mean, they make Star Wars movies. And that's what they were doing with Clone Wars, was making a weekly movie. And so, and even with Mandalorian, every episode of that's a movie as far as I'm concerned. I don't think of it as television, but it really opens up the definition of what television and streaming and media consumption is. That it's not just in movie theaters. That the home can be a kind of movie theater as well. You don't just have to have one or the other. I don't think it's binary. I think both can still coexist very happily, especially once we get COVID a little bit more under control. Because it's a different experience, I think, to experience it publicly in a theater, something that's made to be on the big screen. And there's still a lot of really great stuff that's coming out that's made for the big screen, thankfully. I can't remember the point of what I was going for in any of this.
Oh, just about how you might feel if these characters that you've worked so hard to create would show up in live action form, and maybe even be acted by other people. That there's something sort of bigger than just the initial debut of them and that sort of thing, because we've got people listening to watching the show, calling in our show saying, well, it's like they don't even think about it. They go, well, of course, if the Bad Batch, when they show up on Kenobi or they show up on this, it's so interchangeable now in their minds.
Well, I think I love that idea. I think it's really cool. It was so exciting to see Ahsoka, and to feel that there is this kind of continuity where any of these characters can step into one sort of rendering or another. And as far as other people portraying the characters, of course, I didn't originate the clones, and Tamara Morrison did brilliantly. And I don't feel, even with things that are more, I've kind of, right away I kind of bent it my own way, as did really everybody in the Clone Wars originally right out of the gate, and even more so, much more so with the Bad Batch. But ultimately, I know people appreciate me for my involvement in my part, which I don't want to dismiss that. I think it's important and central. Maybe linchpin, I don't know, but I don't own the Bad Batch, and I'm just an actor. I'm just a voice actor, and it's something that you hand me the script and I help to tell your story. That's what I do. I don't create the content. I don't create the intellectual property. What I own is a piece of my performance, really, but the character is for the creative machine to do with as they will. So that, I mean, I'm not really quite sure what my point is, other than it would be great to see any of the clones that have never been seen before in the feature films, or any of the Bad Batch. I mean, to see them live action. That would be. I think that'd be really exciting. I was very excited to see Boba Fett. In The Mandalorian. I mean, that's very exciting to me. So I would be very, very excited at that prospect.
How about it?
Even
maybe
though I probably
Captain
wouldn't
Rex
be involved
will
with
pop up.
Well,
Rex could
maybe
pop
so,
up.
but Rex would be Tim Morrison. It wouldn't be me playing that. I would. I look more like a clone now than I would in clone armor. In clone armor, I would look less like a clone than I do right now. So I'd be a very different character, I think.
Well, you've been very kind to take some time out. We know you're very much in demand these days, but we couldn't let this season wrap up. We've been covering it nonstop and cheering you on and cheering the show on, and I can tell you that fans are digging it, and we love where it's going, and we're excited for more, and we're so happy that there's going to be another season.
I am so happy for the fans and you and me too. But I'm very happy. Star Wars, I think, is in very good hands, and really great, interesting, creative minds are applying themselves to it right now in various realms. So it's going to keep coming, and it's very exciting.
Well, we couldn't be happier for you and for the future of Star Wars and the Bad Batch. So thank you so much, Dee Bradley Baker, for joining us. And
my pleasure.
Hopefully we can chat again before season 2 kicks off.
Yep, I should be available for that. Sounds like fun.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Dee. Take care, my friend.
May
Bye-bye.
the force be with you.
Thank
And
you.
with you, son.